My name is Chloe. I'm 28 years old, and almost a year ago, I blew up my entire family. Like full on, scorched earth, no survivors, mushroom cloud kind of blew it up. And I did it at Thanksgiving dinner. I know, it sounds so dramatic, so cliche, but it's what happened. And I guess I need to tell someone. I need to get it out of my own head because it's been living in there, renting space, and not paying a single damn bill, you know? So, yeah, grab a drink. This is going to be a long one. This is the story of how I overheard my family, parents, my brother, plotting to completely disinherit me, and how I found their deepest, darkest secret and served it up with the pumpkin pie. Okay, so before we get to the kaboom, you kind of need the guided tour of the museum first. The Museum of Chloe's Family. On the outside, it's all very grand, Big colonial house, perfect lawn, nice cars in the driveway. The kind of family that sends out those Christmas cards where everyone's wearing matching cable knit sweaters and smiling like they don't have a care in the world. We were that family, and it was all a lie. The biggest lie. Let's start with the main exhibit. My dad, Richard. It's so weird to talk about him. It's like he's a ghost now, but he's still alive. He's the sun. The whole family solar system just revolves around him. His moods, his needs, his big, important, capital L legacy. That was his word for everything. Legacy. He was this big shot financial advisor, supposedly self-made, and he had this aura. He didn't have to yell. He had this disappointed sigh. And I swear to you, that sigh could curdle milk. It could make you feel like the smallest, most pathetic creature on the planet. It was his weapon of choice. Silent, but deadly. And orbiting him, always, was my mom. Eleanor. Her entire life's work was my dad, making sure the house was a showpiece, making sure the parties were perfect, making sure nobody ever rocked the boat. She was the high priestess of sweeping things under the rug. You could spill your guts, all your pain and trauma, all over her pristine beige carpet, and she'd have it so thoroughly scrubbed and hidden away, you'd start to believe you just imagined it. She loved me, I think, in her own way, but she loved the absence of conflict more. And in our house, the absence of conflict was just a synonym for my dad's happiness. And then you have the heir to the throne, my brother. Mark, the golden child, 3 years older than me. Mark was perfect. He played the right sports, got the right grades, went to the right college, and went right into business with Dad. He even married his high school sweetheart, Sarah, who was, perfectly pleasant and perfectly beige. They were the future. They were the ones who were going to continue the legacy. He was never really a bully to me, not in a physical way. It was more, I was just air. I was irrelevant, a piece of furniture in the background of his much more important life. The way he and my dad would talk, this easy back and forth about stocks and mergers, it was a language I could never learn. A club I was never invited to join. And then there's me. Hi. I give a little awkward wave. I'm the weird art installation in the corner of the museum that everyone kind of shuffles past. I'm the artistic one, which in my family's language is code for the one who is destined to be a financial failure and a general disappointment. I didn't want to do business. I loved history. I loved stories. So I studied art history, and now I'm an archivist at a small museum, and I love my job. I really do. It's quiet. It's methodical. I get to hold history in my hands. But to them, it was like, oh, that's a cute little hobby you have, Chloe. So Mark just bought another rental property. It was this constant low-level dismissal of my entire life. I was the square peg. I liked old books and my cat Jasper. He's probably around here somewhere. You'll see him eventually. More than I liked the country club. I wasn't a rebel. I didn't scream and fight. I just didn't fit. I sort of faded into the wallpaper. And I spent my whole life trying to audition to get their approval. I'd try so hard, and all I'd ever get was a pat on the head before they'd turn back to mark. It was like death by 1,000 paper cuts. You bleed out so slowly you don't even know you're dying. And Thanksgiving, oh God. Thanksgiving was the annual shareholder meeting for our family's dysfunctional corporation. And I was always the line item that was underperforming. Every year, I'd drive to that house, the one that smelled of my mom's aggressively festive potpourri and my dad's quiet disappointment. And I'd put on my costume, the quiet daughter, the agreeable one. I'd even eat the cranberry sauce. You know the kind. The kind that slides out of the can in a perfect cylinder, ridges and all. It's disgusting. It tastes like sweetened tin. But my mom would put a slice on my plate every year and say, "Just for tradition, honey." And I'd eat it because it was easier to say no. That was me, the path of least resistance. And I had no idea that this year was leading straight off a cliff. So the week of the incident, things were already feeling off. You know that feeling right before a big storm? The air gets thick and heavy and the sky turns a weird color and all the birds get quiet. It felt like that all week. It started with a phone call from my mom on Monday. Her voice was too cheerful. You know, like when someone is trying way too hard to sound normal, it's an immediate red flag. "Chloe, darling, just calling to see how you are. All ready for Thursday? Hey, Mom, yep, I'll be there, 1 o'clock, same as always. Wonderful. And is everything okay with you? Everything good?" The way she asked it was so pointed. Like she wasn't asking, she was like searching for information. I'd actually gotten a small promotion at work. It was mostly a title change to head archivist. Not a huge pay bump or anything, but I was really proud of it. It was a big deal to me. So I said, "Yeah, actually, I got a promotion. They made me head archivist." And there was this pause, not a good pause, not a, "Wow, congratulations, that's amazing" pause. It was a, "Oh." And the lack of enthusiasm was just a punch to the gut. "Oh, that's lovely, dear. Head archivist. How nice." It was the same tone she'd use if I told her I had found a particularly interesting rock. Then her voice shifted, lowered. "Now, Chloe," she said, and it sounded rehearsed. "We need to have a little family discussion on Thursday after dinner about, the estate, legacy things. It's very important that you're there." A discussion? My dad doesn't do discussions. He makes decrees. He issues edicts from on high. A discussion meant something was being carefully staged. And the way she said legacy things, it just sent this little shiver of dread through me. But I did what I always do. I pushed it down. "You're being paranoid, Chloe. You're being overly sensitive." That was their favorite accusation for me. Then 2 days later, I get a text from Mark. Now, Mark literally only communicates with me twice a year. A text that says HBD on my birthday and one that says Merry Christmas. But this time, it was a full sentence. It said, "Hey, really looking forward to seeing you at tea giving. Make sure you don't flake." Flake? I have never, not once in 28 years, flaked on a family holiday. I was the one who would drag myself there with the flu. It was so weird, so out of character, and weirdly aggressive. It didn't feel like an invitation. It felt like a subpoena. The anxiety started humming. It was this low-grade, constant thrumming in my chest that wouldn't go away. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was just pre-holiday stress, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was getting closer. I was at home, trying to work on a personal project, but I couldn't focus. The air in my own apartment felt heavy. That feeling of dread had just taken over. So I decided, and this is so stupid looking back, to drive over to my parents' house. I told myself I was just dropping off the bottle of wine I'd bought so I wouldn't forget it the next day. But that was such a lie. I know now. I was sniffing around. I was like a nervous animal trying to figure out where the danger was coming from. I pulled into the driveway. The house looked so normal, so peaceful. It's this big white colonial that my parents have lived in forever. The house I grew up in. Every brick of it felt familiar and suddenly also very alien. I still have a key to the side door that goes into the mudroom. I let myself in, calling out, "Hello, Mom? Dad? It's me. The house was dead silent, which was weird. The day before Thanksgiving, my mom should have been in a cleaning frenzy, the TV should have been on, something, but it was just still. The only sound was the hum of the big Sub-Zero fridge. Hello? I called out again. Walking into the kitchen, still nothing. And then I heard it. Voices. Very low, very muffled. They were coming from my dad's office. Now, my dad's office, it's like the holy of holies. It's at the very back of the house, behind the formal living room. The door was always shut. When we were kids, it was the one room we were absolutely forbidden to enter. It was where he did important man work. It was his fortress of solitude. My heart just started ba-bum. Ba-boom, ba-boom. I don't even know why. It was pure animal instinct. I kicked off my shoes and tiptoed across the hardwood floor, my socked feet making no sound. The wallpaper in that hallway is this hideous faded floral thing from the 80s that my mom refuses to change. And I remember just staring at the pattern, trying to breathe normally. The office door was closed, but it wasn't fully latched. It was open just a tiny, tiny crack. And I could hear them clearly now. It was my dad, my mom, and Mark, the three of them. I did something I've never done in my life. I pressed myself flat against the wall right next to the door frame, and I listened. My ear was so close to the opening, I could feel the air moving. I held my breath so hard, my lungs started to ache. The first voice I heard clearly was my mom. It was tight, strained. Richard, it just has to be tomorrow. We can't keep putting this off. We do it after dinner as planned. My dad's voice, that low rumble. I know, Eleanor, it's just the optics of it. On a holiday, it's the only time we have her cornered, Dad, Mark cut in, and his voice was so cold, it was like a shard of ice in my ear. It's the only time we know for sure she'll be here and we'll all be together. We just need to be firm. Present it as a done deal. Chloe, for legal and financial reasons, we've made the decision to restructure the family trust. Your portion is being dissolved and folded back into the primary fund, which I'll be managing going forward. Simple, clean. My portion is being dissolved. The words didn't even compute at first. It was like they were speaking a different language. Dissolve. Like salt in water. Like I was just going to disappear. My blood went cold. I felt dizzy. I had to press my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. She's gonna be so upset. You know how sensitive she is. And then my dad let out the sigh, the world-ending, soul-crushing sigh. She'll be emotional. She'll probably cry, and then she'll get over it. Eleanor, let's be realistic. She's not contributing to the future of this family. Her career is a dead end. She has no real prospects. That inheritance, it needs to be with someone who knows how to grow it. It needs to be with Mark to protect the legacy. There it was, that damn word. It felt like he was hitting me with a hammer. Honestly, Mom, it's for her own good, Mark added, and the condescending, sanctimonious tone in his voice made me want to vomit. She wouldn't have a clue what to do with that kind of money anyway. We're protecting her from herself, and more importantly, we're protecting the family assets. We have to think about the agreement. The agreement? What the hell was the agreement? Then my dad's voice dropped, became harder. It's what my father would have wanted. This was all set up for a specific reason. He trusted me, and I trust Mark. Chloe is a loose end. This tidies it up. It's better for everyone. And it ensures the secret stays safe. A secret stays safe. It wasn't just that I was a disappointment. It wasn't just that they thought I was a loser. This was about a secret. Getting rid of me financially was about protecting a secret. I couldn't breathe. The ugly floral wallpaper was swimming in my vision. I thought I was going to be sick right there on the Persian runner. They were talking about me, my life, my future, my value as a human being, and they were talking about me like I was a problem on a spreadsheet, a rounding error that needed to be deleted. I had to get out. I backed away from the door, my movements jerky and robotic. I felt like I was floating. I floated back through the kitchen, back through the mudroom, and slipped out the side door, pulling it so gently closed behind me. I got back in my car. I was still clutching the bottle of wine I'd brought. My knuckles were white. I just sat there in the driver's seat, staring at the front of that perfect, quiet, lying house. And then the shaking started. This deep, uncontrollable tremor that racked my whole body. They were going to do it. They were going to publicly execute my place in the family on Thanksgiving, and they were all in on it. I honestly don't remember driving home. It's a total blank. The next thing I remember, I was fumbling with my keys at my apartment door, my hands shaking so bad it took me 3 tries to get it in the lock. I stumbled inside, and my cat, Jasper, came trotting up to me, meowing his little head off for his dinner, and I slid down the wall and landed in a heap on my own welcome mat. I think I was trying to say something to him, but no sound came out. And that's when the dam broke. It wasn't that pretty single tear rolling down your cheek kind of crying you see in movies. It was ugly. It was this horrible, silent, guttural sobbing that felt like it was being ripped out of my stomach. It was the sound of 28 years of feeling less than finally crashing down on me. A loose end. Her career is a dead end. Protecting her from herself. It keeps the secret safe. The words were on a loop in my brain. Every single memory I had of my family was instantly tainted. Every dismissive comment, every patronizing smile, every time I felt invisible, it wasn't just casual neglect. It was a symptom of this deep-seated belief that I was fundamentally worthless to them. I was a liability. I managed to crawl from the door to the couch and curl into the tightest ball I could possibly get. I felt like I was losing my mind. Did I dream it? Did I misunderstand? My brain was desperately trying to find an escape hatch, another explanation that wasn't, your family is actively plotting your emotional and financial ruin. But there was no other explanation. The clinical, detached way they spoke, there was no doubt. The pain was physical. It felt like a boulder was sitting on my chest, crushing the air out of my lungs. I was just drowning in it, drowning in the grief, in the betrayal. But then, as I was sinking, something else started to rise up from the bottom. Something hot and sharp and unfamiliar. It was rage. A white-hot, furious rage that I had never, ever felt in my entire life. I had spent my whole life being the good girl, the quiet one, the one who never made a fuss. I ate the damn cranberry sauce. I smiled when they belittled my passions. I made myself smaller and smaller and smaller so that they could feel bigger. And for what? So they could call me a loose end and tidy me up like I was a mess they had to clean up? No. I wasn't going to do it. I wasn't going to just let them. I wasn't going to sit at that stupid polished dining room table and let them calmly assassinate my life and then just pass the gravy. I wasn't going to cry on cue and then just get over it. And that's when the other part of what they said really clicked into play. It ensures the secret stays safe. They were doing this to protect a secret. Well, maybe their secret didn't deserve to be safe. I sat up on the couch. The tears stopped. The drowning feeling was gone. It was replaced by a terrifying, exhilarating clarity. I was gonna find out what that secret was. And then I was going to bring it to Thanksgiving as my +1. The next 24 hours, I don't think I slept. I was running on pure adrenaline and a level of rage that was honestly probably not healthy. The grief was still there, like a cold, hard stone in my stomach. But the anger was the fire that was keeping me moving. I turned into an archaeologist, but instead of digging for ancient pottery, I was digging for the bones of my own family. My brain was on fire. The agreement, what my father would have wanted, a secret. It all pointed back in one direction. My grandfather, my dad's dad, Grandpa Thomas. He died when I was really little, like 4 or 5. I barely remember him. He was just this phantom, this name that was never, ever spoken. Think about this. My dad is obsessed with legacy, right? But his entire side of the family is a complete blank. My mom's side, we had cousins and aunts and great aunts. We knew their stories. But my dad's side? Nothing. There were no pictures of Grandpa Thomas in the house. None. In a house that was a shrine to family photos, the man whose name my father carried was completely absent. If I ever asked about him, my dad would get this tight, closed-off look and say, he was a complicated man. And that was it. Conversation over. My mom would shoot me a look that said, you have poked the bear, do not poke the bear again. The secret had to be about him. I felt it in my bones. I knew I had to get back into that house, into the office. I waited until the next morning, Wednesday. I knew their schedule by heart. Mom had her weekly bridge club from 10 to 1. Dad had a standing golf game every Wednesday morning, a sacred ritual. Mark would be at work. It was my only shot. Driving back to the house that morning, I felt like a spy in a movie. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't fear. It was purpose. I let myself in again. Quiet as a mouse. The house was still and silent. It felt like I was breaking into my own past. I went straight for the office. The door was unlocked. I slipped inside and closed it behind me. It smelled like him. Old spice and leather and old paper. A smell that used to be comforting, but now it just made me sick. The room was dark, all mahogany and dark green leather. It was a cliche of a rich man's office. I started with the desk. I opened every drawer. It was all so neat, so organized. Client files, bank statements, boring. Nothing. My eyes scanned the room, getting more and more desperate. And then I saw it. Tucked away in a corner, partially hidden by a big, stupid-looking potted fern, was a safe. A heavy, old-school, black metal safe with a combination dial. Of course there was a safe. My heart sank. How the hell was I supposed to get into that? I tried the obvious birthdays. His, my mom's, Mark's. I even tried my own, just on the off chance he had a sense of irony. Nothing. I was about to give up. I was literally about to just walk out. And then I remembered this weird thing about my dad, this tic he had. He was obsessed with the date he founded his company. He'd work it into conversations at parties. October 23rd, 1985, he'd say, puffing out his chest, the day I built my legacy from the ground up. It was his origin story, his superhero moment. 10-2-3-85. My fingers were trembling so badly I could barely turn the dial. Right to 10, left past 10, stopping on 23, right to 85. I held my breath and pulled the handle. Click. It opened. I swear, my heart just stopped. I knelt on the floor and pulled the heavy door open. It was mostly full of what you'd expect: stock certificates, property deeds, bond documents. But underneath it all, at the very bottom, was a thin brown leather folio. It looked old. It had no label. It felt secret. My hands were shaking as I lifted it out. I sat right there on the floor of my father's inner sanctum, and I opened it. And for the second time in less than a day, my entire world shattered. The folio was full of old, brittle documents. Yellow paper, spidery ink, the kind of thing I work with every day at the museum, except this wasn't some stranger's history. This was mine. A history I never knew existed. The very first thing I pulled out was a birth certificate for my father, Richard. It listed his name, his date of birth. It listed my grandmother's name as the mother, but the space for the father's name, it didn't say Thomas. It said Arthur Findlay. I just stared at that name. Arthur Findlay. I'd never heard it before in my life. I read it 10 times thinking I must be misreading it, but I wasn't. The man I knew as my grandfather, Thomas, wasn't his father. My mind was just short-circuiting. I kept digging through the papers, my hands moving automatically. There was a small bundle of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. They were love letters from Arthur Findlay to my grandmother. He called her his dearest Eleanor, which was my mom's name too. How weird is that? They were beautiful letters, full of hope and plans for a future together. And then the tone of the letters changed. They got desperate. He wrote about his family, the Findlays, who were apparently very wealthy and very powerful. They had found out about my grandmother, who must have been from a lower social class or something, and they forbade the relationship. The last letter was heartbreaking. It was dated just before my dad was born. Arthur promised he would find a way for them to be together, that he wouldn't let his family tear them apart. It was the last letter in the bundle. The next document I found was a marriage license for my grandmother, Eleanor, to Thomas. It was dated 2 weeks after my dad was born, a shotgun wedding, but the groom wasn't the father. And then I found the centerpiece, the Rosetta Stone of my family's bullshit. It was a formal legal contract, an agreement, the agreement. It was between Arthur Findlay and Thomas. I read it and I felt the blood drain from my face. Arthur Findlay, forced by his family to abandon my grandmother, had made a deal. Thomas, a man who worked for the Findlay family, would marry my pregnant grandmother, raise my dad as his own son, and give him the respectable Thomas name. In exchange for this service, Arthur Findlay would secretly create and fund A massive trust. It was the seed money for everything. My dad's self-made company, the house, the cars, the country club membership, Mark's fancy education, my own college tuition. It all came from this secret slush fund. It was guilt money from my real grandfather. My dad's entire life, his entire identity as this hardworking man who pulled himself up by his bootstraps, it was a complete and total fraud. But there was one more page tucked at the very back of the folio. It was an addendum to the trust, written years later in a much shakier hand. It was from Arthur Finley, clearly written shortly before he died. It stated that upon his death, a separate, smaller portion of his fortune was to be given directly to his biological grandchildren, bypassing my dad entirely. It was a direct inheritance to be paid out on each grandchild's 30th birthday. Mark is 31. He must have already gotten his. I'm 28. My 30th birthday is less than 2 years away. And in that instant, everything became crystal clear. The plot to disinherit me, it wasn't just about them thinking I was a flaky artist. It was about my inheritance, the money that was coming to me from Arthur. If I received that money, a huge sum from an unknown source, I would start asking questions. I'd uncover the truth. I'd expose the lie that my father had built his entire life on. They weren't just cutting me out. They were trying to steal my inheritance to protect a lie. My father was willing to rob his own daughter to maintain his fragile, fraudulent ego. I felt like I was going to throw up. I just knelt there on the floor, surrounded by these pieces of paper that had completely rewritten my life. I took out my phone, and with trembling hands, I took a clear, high-resolution photograph of every single page in that folio. The birth certificate, the letters, the contract, the addendum. I documented the evidence of their crime. Then I put everything back exactly as I'd found it, spun the dial, and slid the big, stupid fern back in front of it. I walked out of that office and out of that house, and I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt like a weapon, and I was aimed right at the heart of my family. That night, Wednesday night, I was bizarrely calm. It was the calm of a decision made, you know? All the anxiety, the fear, the confusion, it was gone. It had been replaced by this cold, hard certainty. There was no more what if, there was only what was next. I sat on my couch with Jasper purring on my lap like nothing was wrong with the world, and I just scrolled through the photos on my phone. I read the documents again and again until the words were seared into my brain. For a second, just a split second, I thought about bailing. I could just run. Pack a bag, take my cat, move to Oregon or something, change my name, let them have their poisonous secret and their dirty money. But then I pictured it. I pictured them at that Thanksgiving table. I pictured my dad delivering his little speech about my dissolved inheritance to an empty chair. I pictured Mark's smug, satisfied face. I pictured my mom bustling around pretending it was all for the best. And the thought of them getting away with it, of them winning so easily, it made my blood boil. They wanted to erase me. They wanted to talk about legacy. Fine. We'll talk about legacy. We'll talk about the real one. So I made a plan, a very detailed plan. Thanksgiving morning, I woke up before the sun. I didn't feel nervous. I felt like an actress on opening night. I took a long, hot shower. I did my hair. I put on makeup, eyeliner, mascara, the whole 9 yards. I put on a nice dress, this dark green velvet one that I love. I wanted to look strong. I wanted to look like someone they couldn't just tidy up. Then I went to a Kinko's and I printed everything. I made 5 beautiful, high-quality, full-color sets of the evidence. One for me, one for mom, one for dad, one for Mark, and one for his perfect, complicit wife, Sarah. Oh yeah, she was getting one too. I bought 5 crisp, clean manila envelopes. I assembled my little party favors. I went home and put the envelopes in my tote bag, right next to the ridiculously inadequate bottle of wine I was bringing. My bag felt heavy. It felt like it was full of bricks. The whole time, there was this tiny, panicked voice in the back of my head screaming at me. Chloe, this is crazy. Don't do this. You are setting off a bomb in the middle of your own life. You will destroy everything. And I just calmly answered it in my head. They destroyed it first. I'm just holding up a mirror. I mean, tell me, guys, what would you have done here? Was I the bad guy here? I really don't know. I really don't. But at that moment, it felt like the only form of justice I had left. I pulled into the driveway at exactly 1 p.m. The house looked disgustingly normal. Wreath on the door, little pumpkins arranged on the steps. A perfect picture. It made my stomach churn. I took one last deep breath in my car. I grabbed my tote bag, my arsenal, and I walked up to the front door. Before my finger even touched the doorbell, the door flew open. It was my mom wearing a festival Thanksgiving apron with this huge, fake, frantic smile plastered on her face. Chloe, you made it! How wonderful! She chirped, and she pulled me into this hug that was it was all wrong. It was too tight, too desperate, like she was physically trying to restrain me. Hi, Mom, I said. My voice was eerily calm. I was proud of how calm it was. I stepped inside. The smells hit me immediately. Roasting turkey, sage stuffing, my mom's apple pie. The smells that used to mean comfort and home. Now they just smelled like hypocrisy. My dad and Mark were on the couches in the living room watching football, drinking beers, the picture of male entitlement. My dad glanced up, gave me a curt nod, Chloe, and then his eyes darted away.
He couldn't even look at me. Coward. Mark, on the other hand, gave me this greasy, self-satisfied smile. Hey, sis. Glad you could make it, he said. It was his text message in verbal form. Good. The condemned has arrived for her execution. I smiled right back at him, a big, genuine-looking smile. Wouldn't miss it for the world, Mark, I said. You should have seen the look on his face. It was priceless. He expected me to be mopey or scared or anxious. He didn't expect me. This version of me, this calm, smiling person who looked like she didn't have a care in the world. It clearly threw him off his game. Good. Sarah, his wife, glided over and gave me one of those cheek kisses that don't actually touch you. Love the dress, Chloe, she said, but her eyes were doing that thing where they scan you up and down, calculating your worth. Thanks, Sarah, I said, my smile never wavering. I just felt like dressing up for such a special family occasion. The tension in that room was so thick you could have carved it with the turkey knife. We were all playing our parts in this bizarre, horrible play, but I was the only one who knew how it was going to end. They made small talk. They asked about my little museum. I was polite. I was cheerful. I was a ticking bomb in a velvet dress. I went to help my mom in the kitchen. She was a mess. Her movements were all jerky and nervous. She almost dropped the gravy ladle twice. Are you all right, Chloe? She asked, her back to me, furiously basting the turkey. You seem, I don't know, different? I'm fantastic, Mom, I said, my voice dripping with false sincerity. Never been better. She didn't know what to do with that. She just nodded, her shoulders tight. I was letting them sweat. They created this storm, and now they were getting nervous about the rain. Poetic, really.
Dinner's ready, my mom finally called out, her voice high and shrill. We all filed into the dining room. The big, formal table was set with the good china, the crystal glasses, the silverware my mom only broke out for Christmas and Thanksgiving. It was all so beautiful and civilized, a perfect stage for a bloodbath. I took my seat, placing my tote bag on the floor next to my chair. The weight of it was grounding. Dad sat at the head of the table, of course. He began to carve the turkey with this absurd level of pomp and circumstance. We passed the plates, dry turkey, lumpy mashed potatoes, green bean casserole with those weird canned onions on top, and of course the slice of jellied cranberry sauce, which I accepted with a polite nod. The conversation was excruciating. Mark droned on about some deal he closed. Sarah talked about their kitchen renovation plans. My dad grunted his approval. My mom gushed over Sarah's choice of countertops. It was like listening to a recording of every other holiday meal we'd ever had. I was mostly silent. I took a few bites of food. It tasted like ash. I just watched them. I studied their faces. I was trying to burn the image into my memory. This is the last time. This is the end. And then Sarah gave me the opening. She turned to me, her head tilted with that perfect condescending pity. So, Chloe, still just playing with all those dusty old papers down at the museum? Mark snickered into his wine glass. I put down my fork. I looked right at her, and I smiled. I am, actually, I said. My voice was clear, and it cut right through their chatter. The table went silent. It's truly amazing what you can find in dusty old papers. The stories they tell, the secrets people try to bury. I saw a flicker of panic in my mother's eyes. My dad put his fork down with a soft clink. The football game in the other room suddenly seemed miles away. Mark, bless his arrogant heart, tried to gloss over it. Well, as long as it makes you happy, I guess, he said in that voice you use with a child. Oh, it does, I replied, my eyes locking with my father's. In fact, I've been doing some archival work on our own family history lately, and you guys are not going to believe what I found. My dad's face started to get that tight, angry look. Chloe, I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is not the time or the place. This was it, the moment. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. The little voice was screaming, no, don't, stop. I took a breath. Oh, I think this is the perfect time and place. You're always going on about legacy, Dad. I just thought it was time we all finally learned the truth about ours. My father's face was turning a blotchy red. That's enough, he said, his voice a low growl. No, I said, it's not. I reached down into my tote bag. The sound of the paper rustling was like a gunshot in the silent room. I pulled out the 5 manila envelopes. I placed one neatly beside my own plate. Then I stood up. I walked around the table. I placed an envelope next to my mother's water glass. She physically recoiled, like I'd put a spider there. I went to Mark and Sarah. I placed their envelopes side by side in front of them. Sarah looked from the envelope to Mark, her face a mask of confusion. Mark just stared at it, his smug mask completely shattered, replaced by pure, naked panic. Finally, I walked to the head of the table, to my father. I held his envelope out to him. He wouldn't take it. He just glared at me, his jaw clenched so hard a muscle was twitching in his cheek. So I just laid it gently on the pristine white tablecloth right next to his plate. Happy Thanksgiving, I said. My voice was quiet. I walked back to my seat. I said, go on, to the shell-shocked table. Open them. Think of it as a party favor. No one moved. They were all frozen, like a photograph. Fine, I sighed, as if I were bored. I'll give you the Cliff's Notes version. I locked my eyes on my father. I know about Arthur Findlay. The name landed in the center of the table and exploded. My father flinched like he'd been shot. My mother made a small choking sound and pressed her napkin to her lips. Mark's eyes were wide with terror. He knew. Of course, the golden child knew. I know that he was your real father. I know that Thomas was just some guy your real grandfather paid to marry your mother and give you a last name so the rich Findlay family wouldn't be embarrassed. I know that every single thing you have, Dad, this house, your company, your entire legacy was built on a pile of secret guilt money from a man you erased. Sarah was staring at Mark, her mouth hanging open. Mark, what is she talking about? She whispered, her voice trembling. Mark wouldn't look at her. He just stared at his mashed potatoes as if they held the secrets to the universe. I know about the agreement, I continued, my voice getting louder. The contract that said you had to keep it all a secret. And I know about the addendum to the trust, the one Arthur wrote before he died. The one that sets aside a direct inheritance for his grandchildren. For me. The inheritance you were planning to steal from me tomorrow after you'd all had your fill of turkey and pie. I leaned forward. I planted my hands on the table. You weren't disinheriting me because I'm a disappointment. You were doing it to hide your pathetic little secret to protect your fragile ego and your great big lie of being a self-made man. You are going to rob your own daughter to protect your pride. My father finally found his voice. It was a strangled, furious sound. You You went in my office? In my safe? Yes, I said, and I felt no shame. I did. Right after I stood in the hallway and listened to you, Mom, and Mark dismiss my entire life and plan my execution. You called me a loose end. You said I needed to be tidied up. So I decided to find out what mess I was supposedly making. My mother finally broke. It wasn't quiet crying. It was loud, ugly, gut-wrenching sobs. Chloe, how could you do this to us? She wailed. To you? I all but screamed, the rage finally breaking free. How could you do this to me? You're my mother. You sat there and planned this with them. You were going to watch them destroy me and then ask if I wanted more stuffing. I whirled on Mark. And you, my big brother? Protecting me from myself? Is that the lie you told yourself so you could sleep at night while you plotted to steal what was mine? Mark looked up, his face slick with sweat. You don't understand, Chloe. Oh, I understand everything. I was on my feet now, my chair scraping back harshly. I understand that this house is a house of cards built on a lie. And I refuse to be the card you pull out from the bottom just to keep it standing. Bam! My dad slammed his fist on the table. Plates and glasses jumped. Get out! He roared, his face a terrifying shade of purple. Get out of my house! Now! With leisure, I said. My voice was suddenly calm and quiet again. The storm had passed. This was never really your house anyway, was it? It was paid for by Arthur Finn. Maybe you should thank him sometime. I grabbed my purse and my tote bag, leaving my own unopened envelope on the table as a final silent. I didn't look at any of their. I turned my back on them, on the wreckage of the dining room, on the whole damn museum of lies, and I walked out. The sound of my mother's wailing and my father's enraged, incoherent shouting followed me all the way to the front door. That first breath of cold November air when I stepped outside. It was the best breath I ever taken in my life. It was like I was breathing recycled, poisoned air for 28 years and I was finally outside. I got in my car and I just sat there for a minute in the dark street back at the house. The dining room window was all lit up, perfect golden rectangle. I could see their shapes moving around inside, frantic and chaotic, like ants whose hill had just been kicked over. I could almost hear the screaming. I could picture Sarah turning on Mark, my mom trying to placate my dad's entire world. And for a second, I felt this horrible pang of something. Grief, maybe? I had just done an unforgivable thing. I had taken a sword to the tapestry of my family. But then I heard their voices in my head again. Loose end. Tidy it up. And the grief vanished. It wasn't a tapestry. It was a cheap curtain. And I had just pulled it back to show the rot and the mold growing on the wall behind it. They did this, not me. I put my car in reverse. I didn't peel out. I just backed away slowly, calmly. I drove away from that house, from that street, from that whole life. And I didn't look in the rearview mirror once. I drove home through the quiet streets, past other houses with their own golden windows, their own holiday dramas, and I felt more alone than I have ever been in my life. But it was a different kind of alone. It wasn't the lonely of being the outsider in a crowd. It was the clean, quiet, empty alone of freedom. When I got to my apartment, Jasper was there, of course, winding around my ankles. I just dropped my bags and scooped him up and buried my face in his soft gray fur, and I just stood there in my dark entryway, holding my cat, and I let it all wash over me. The relief, the terror, the grief, the wild, terrifying joy. My phone started buzzing in my purse. A call from Mom. I stared at it until it stopped ringing. It buzzed again. A text from Mark. I opened it. It said, "You have absolutely no idea what you've just done." I actually laughed. A real, out loud laugh. Oh, buddy. I had a very, very good idea. I blocked his number, then my mom's, then my dad's. One by one. Snip, snip, snip. Then I went to my computer and I ordered the biggest, greasiest pepperoni pizza I could find. And I sat on my floor in my velvet dress, eating pizza straight from the box with my cat in the absolute, beautiful, terrifying wreckage of my former life. And for the first time I could remember, I felt at peace. So that was that. That was Thanksgiving. It's been almost a year. And yeah, life is different. The aftermath was about as messy as you'd imagine. I had to get a lawyer, obviously. My dad, through his lawyer, tried to fight me on the inheritance, of course. But the minute my lawyer made it clear that a court battle would mean all of Arthur Finley's documents would become public record, they caved. The thought of his country club buddies and business partners knowing the truth about his legacy was more terrifying to him than giving me the money. So, on my 30th birthday, a sum of money from a man I never note will be wired into my account. It's not a king's ransom, but it's enough. It's a start. It's a final act of kindness from the grandfather I never knew. I haven't spoken a single word to any of them since that day. I got a few nasty emails, a horrible voicemail from an aunt telling me I was a monster for what I did to my mother. I just deleted them. I had to. It was self-preservation. Some days are hard, I'm not gonna lie. Some days I wake up and the guilt is just crushing. I wonder if I went too far. I miss my mom. Or not the woman she is now, but the idea of her. The mom who packed my lunches and read me bedtime stories. I grieve for that. I grieve for the family I wished I'd had. But then I remember the cold, clinical sound of their voices through that door. I remember being a problem that needed to be tidied up. And I know I did the right thing. For the first time in my entire life, I chose me. I chose my own sanity and my own self-worth over their comfort and their lies. And you know what? It's been a good year, a quiet year, a lonely year in some ways, but I'm figuring out who Chloe is without the label of the disappointing daughter. I'm making friends, real friends, who think my job is cool and who laugh at my stupid jokes. I'm building my own legacy, I guess. A small one, built on honesty and good pizza and a very fluffy cat. I guess the reason I'm telling this whole insane story to you, to the internet, is because I'm not ashamed anymore. For a long time, I was, but I'm not. I'm an archivist. My whole life is about preserving the truth and making sure stories don't get buried. And this was just the most important story I've ever had to unearth. It was my own, and it deserves to be told. So yeah, thanks for listening to all this. It feels lighter now that it's out. Anyway, I'm gonna go make some tea.
If you liked this story, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment to let us know what you thought. I love to hear how this story made you feel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.